Hello. Let me preface this by saying I've always loved thrift stores. For me, they're little time capsules, places where discarded items hold memories of lives lived, stories forgotten. My wife, Clara, teases me about it, calling it my weird little hobby, but I think she secretly finds it endearing. At least she used to. This past Saturday, I was wandering through a dusty little second-hand shop downtown. It's one of those places where the air smells faintly of mildew, and the aisles are so cluttered you have to shuffle sideways to pass someone. I was halfway through when I spotted an old wooden frame leaning against a stack of yellowed books. The photograph inside caught my eye, a black and white snapshot of a group of people laughing together, their smiles frozen in time. Something about it was magnetic. Maybe it was the carefree way they stood, arms slung around each other like nothing in the world could touch them. And then I saw her. My heart skipped. There, in the center of the group, was a woman who looked exactly like Clara. Same sharp jawline, same distinct dimple on her left cheek. Even the way her hair fell over her shoulders. It was uncanny. The photo was dated 1982. A full 9 years before Clara was even born. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. People have doppelgangers, right? Still, I couldn't leave it there. I paid $5 for the frame and hurried home, my mind buzzing with questions. That evening, while Clara was busy chopping vegetables for dinner, I slipped into my office to study the photo under better light. The resemblance wasn't just uncanny, it was impossible. I noticed something else, too. In the background, there was a banner that read, *Happy Retirement, Colonel Adams, *. I had no idea who Colonel Adams was, but the detail felt important somehow, like a breadcrumb leading to answers I didn't know I needed. I almost showed the photo to Clara right then, but something stopped me. I'm not sure if it was the gnawing feeling that I was overthinking or the strange hesitation I felt when I looked at her that night. She was humming a soft tune while cooking, her movements fluid and practiced, but there was something distant about her. She didn't ask about my day, didn't tease me about whatever junk I dragged home this time. Maybe I was imagining it, but it felt like she was avoiding looking at me directly. Later that night, as we sat on the couch watching TV, I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept drifting back to the photo. Every so often, I'd glance at Clara. She was scrolling through her phone, her face lit by the faint glow of the screen. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I didn't know her. Not completely, anyway. Here's the thing. Clara and I have been married for 6 years. We've had our ups and downs, who hasn't? But I've always believed we were solid. She's smart, confident, a little headstrong. Sure, but that's part of what I love about her. There was a time when I would have said we were one of those couples who could weather anything. But now, looking at her, I wasn't so sure. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I started digging into the photo. I scanned it and ran a reverse image search online, hoping to find more information about the people in it. Nothing came up. I even tried looking up Colonel Adams and Retirement Party 1982, but it was like shouting into the void. No leads, no answers, just more questions. Then, Monday morning, something strange happened. Clara left for work earlier than usual. She said she had a meeting, but she didn't kiss me goodbye like she normally does. It was a small thing, but it stuck with me. That evening, when I asked her about her day, she was vague, brushing off my questions with half-hearted answers. By Tuesday, I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. It wasn't just the photo. Clara's behavior was off. She was on her phone more than usual. Her laughter at my jokes felt forced, and there was a tension in the air I couldn't explain. Wednesday night, I caught her in the kitchen, staring at her phone with an expression I couldn't place. Something between worry and guilt. When she saw me, she quickly locked the screen and shoved the phone into her pocket. I asked her if everything was okay, and she smiled, too wide, and said, "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" That night, lying in bed next to her, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the week's events in my mind, trying to connect dots that didn't seem to exist. The photo, the early meeting, the phone. Was I being paranoid? Or was there something real hiding beneath the surface? I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's nothing, just my imagination running wild. But part of me feels like I'm on the edge of something big, something I'm not sure I'm ready to face. Has anyone ever experienced something like this? Am I overthinking? Or is my gut trying to tell me something? And, most importantly, who is the woman in the photograph? After that sleepless night, I couldn't let it go. I wasn't even sure what it was. Just this gnawing sense that something about Clara, about our life, wasn't adding up. The photograph had to mean something, even if I didn't understand what yet. I went back to the thrift store the following afternoon, clutching the photo in its old wooden frame. The owner, a wiry man with thick glasses named Dave, gave me a bemused look when I explained what I wanted. "You're saying you think this picture's connected to your wife?" he asked, scratching his head. "Not exactly," I said, struggling to explain. "It just... Look, do you know where this came from?" Dave shrugged. "People bring in all kinds of junk. Hard to keep track." He tapped the frame thoughtfully. "But I've got a buddy who's good with photos. He restores old ones. If you want, I could send this to him, see what he makes of it." I agreed, leaving the photo with him and heading home feeling no closer to answers. I tried telling myself I'd done all I could, but the unease wouldn't leave me. It wasn't just the photo. It was Clara. Over the next few days, her behavior grew stranger. For starters, she started coming home later than usual. She'd blame it on work, saying she was swamped with last-minute projects. At first, I believed her. Clara's always been ambitious, and late nights weren't entirely out of character. But when I glanced at her laptop one evening, I noticed she hadn't opened any work emails in hours. Then there were the phone calls. She started taking them in another room. Her voice hushed, her tone clipped. Once, I caught a snippet of her conversation as I walked past the door. "It's not that simple," she was saying. "Just give me time. Okay?" I froze. Clara didn't notice me, too wrapped up in whoever was on the other end of the line. When she came out a few minutes later, her smile was bright, but it didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to ask who she'd been talking to, but the words caught in my throat. What if I didn't want to know the answer? My paranoia grew. I started checking her phone when she left it unattended, but she'd set a new passcode. A subtle change, but telling. Meanwhile, her mood swung between overly affectionate and oddly distant. One night, she curled up next to me on the couch, laughing at a sitcom like nothing was wrong. The next morning, she barely acknowledged me before rushing out the door. The strangest find came when I was doing laundry. I reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a receipt from a jewelry store. It was for a gold bracelet, a purchase I knew nothing about. Clara wasn't the type to buy herself expensive jewelry on a whim, and she hadn't mentioned it as a gift for anyone. So who was it for? And why was she keeping it a secret? When I confronted her that evening, she didn't flinch. "Oh, that," she said with a dismissive wave. "It's for Sarah. She's been having a rough time lately, so I thought I'd get her something nice." Sarah was one of her co-workers, a name I vaguely recognized from office parties and holiday cards. It was a reasonable explanation, or would have been, if not for the look that flickered across Clara's face as she said it. Guilt. Or was it something else? Doubt crept in again, whispering that I was seeing things that weren't there. A few days later, Dave from the thrift store called. "Hey, you're not gonna believe this," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "My buddy ran some tests on that photo. Turns out, it's not as old as it looks." What do you mean? I asked, gripping the phone tightly. The fading, the wear, it's all fake. Manufactured. And that date on the bottom? Completely bogus. That picture was taken last year. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. That doesn't make any sense, I stammered. How could a photo like that end up in a thrift store? That's the weird part, Dave said. No idea. But my guy said whoever made it went to a lot of trouble to make it look old. Thought you'd want to know. After hanging up, I stared at the wall, my mind racing. If the photo wasn't from 1982, then the woman in it couldn't be a long-lost relative or some eerie doppelganger from the past. It had to be Clara. But why would she pose for a fake vintage photo? And who were the other people in it? That night, I showed Clara the photo. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Do you recognize anyone in this? I asked, handing it to her carefully. She looked at it for barely a second before laughing. What is this? Some kind of joke? Why are you even asking me about this? Her reaction felt wrong. Too casual. Too rehearsed. When I pressed her, she shrugged it off, saying it must be a coincidence, some random woman who looked like her. But she wouldn't look me in the eye as she said it. The next morning, Clara announced she was going on a work retreat for the weekend. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But now, every word, every action felt like part of a larger puzzle I couldn't see the edges of. Before she left, I asked, "Where's the retreat?" "Upstate," she said, tossing her overnight bag into the car. "I'll text you the details later." She didn't. As I stood in the driveway watching her drive away, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't coming back. At least not in the way I knew her. I was no closer to the truth, but one thing was certain. Clara was hiding something, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know what it was. Clara returned from her weekend retreat on Sunday evening, breezing into the house with a forced brightness that immediately set me on edge. She kissed me on the cheek, too quickly, and dropped her bag by the door. "The retreat was great," she said before I could ask. "Really productive." I nodded, studying her face. She looked tired, almost drawn. But there was a flicker of something else in her eyes. Relief, maybe? Or was it dread? As we sat down to dinner, I felt like the air between us was charged. My thoughts raced. Every word she said seemed calculated, like she was carefully choosing what to say and what to leave out. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Clara paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "What's up?" I reached for the photo which I'd hidden in my lap. Slowly, I placed it on the table between us. Her eyes flicked to it, and for the briefest moment I saw it, the recognition. It was there, even if she tried to mask it with a frown. "We've talked about this already," she said. Her voice clipped. "It's not me. It's just someone who looks like me." "Clara," I said, leaning forward. "I had it analyzed. It's not from 1982. It was taken last year." Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly. "And? That doesn't mean anything. It's still not me." "Then explain why you reacted like that just now." I shot back, my frustration boiling over. "You recognized it." "I saw it." Clara slammed her fork down, her voice rising. "You're being ridiculous. You're obsessing over some random photo like it's proof of something sinister. Do you even hear yourself?" I wanted to believe her. Part of me was desperate to be wrong, to let this all be a huge misunderstanding. But her defensiveness wasn't normal. It was a wall, hastily thrown up to keep me from seeing whatever was on the other side. "Why can't you just tell me the truth?" I said, my voice breaking slightly. "What's going on, Clara? Who are those people? What are you hiding?" She pushed back from the table and stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this," she said, storming out of the room. When you're ready to stop accusing me of whatever this is, let me know. I let her go, my mind spinning. Every instinct told me she was lying, but the way she turned it around on me made me hesitate. Was I the one losing it? That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I came up with a plan. If Clara wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it on my own. The next morning, I waited until Clara left for work before going through her things. I felt sick to my stomach doing it, but I had no choice. I started with her purse and found nothing unusual. Just her wallet, some gum, and a couple of receipts. Then I moved to her overnight bag from the retreat. At first, it seemed empty, but as I rifled through the pockets, my hand brushed against something tucked into a side compartment. A business card. It was plain white, with a name printed in bold letters. Dr. Patrick Moreno, clinical hypnotist. Below that was an address in a neighboring city. My mind reeled. Clara had never mentioned seeing a hypnotist. Why would she? And why would she lie about it? I slipped the card into my pocket, deciding it was worth investigating. That evening, I decided to test the waters. As we sat down to dinner again, I casually asked, "So, how was the retreat? Did you get to know any of the speakers?" Clara barely looked up from her plate. "Not really. It was mostly workshops. And they didn't bring in anyone special? No guest experts or anything?" She shook her head. "Nope. Why do you ask?" I shrugged, keeping my expression neutral. "Just curious." Her lie confirmed. I knew I couldn't confront her again. At least not yet. I needed more. The next day, I drove to the address on the business card. It led to a small office in a nondescript strip mall. The glass door was frosted, with Dr. Patrick Moreno, clinical hypnotist, written in block letters. My hands felt clammy as I stepped inside. The receptionist, a woman with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" Yeah, I said, trying to sound casual. "I was wondering if Dr. Moreno is taking new clients." She smiled. "He is. Are you looking for help with something specific? Stress, smoking cessation, memory work?" "Memory work?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. She nodded. "It's a specialty of his. He helps people recover repressed memories or, in some cases, work through trauma. It's quite effective." Something cold settled in my chest. What could Clara possibly need with memory work? Was she trying to remember something? Or forget something? I made an appointment for the following week, intending to gather more information. As I walked back to my car, my mind raced with possibilities. Was this about the photo? Had something happened to Clara that she couldn't, or wouldn't, tell me? And if so, why go to such lengths to hide it? That evening, I decided to set a trap. I waited until Clara was in the shower, then slipped into the kitchen and grabbed her phone. It was locked, as I expected, but I opened the Notes app on my own phone and typed out a text message. "Hey, I think he's on to us. Call me as soon as you can." Then I sent it from my phone to hers and left it on the counter where she'd see it. When Clara came out of the bathroom, she spotted the message immediately. Her face froze as she read it, her expression shifting between panic and anger. "What is this?" she demanded, holding up the phone. "I was hoping you could tell me," I said, my voice calm but firm. Her eyes darted away for a fraction of a second, just long enough to confirm what I already suspected. "I don't know who sent this," she said finally, her voice shaking. "But whoever it is, they're lying." I nodded slowly, pretending to believe her, all the while knowing the real test was yet to come. Because whoever she was hiding, or whatever, wouldn't stay hidden for long. By the time the weekend arrived, I was exhausted, mentally, emotionally, even physically. Every glance from Clara, every word she spoke, felt like a lie, and the tension between us was unbearable. But now I was close. I could feel it. My appointment with Dr. Patrick Moreno was set for Saturday morning. I didn't tell Clara where I was going. I said I needed to run errands, and she barely looked up from her coffee as I walked out the door. The office was quiet when I arrived, with the same receptionist smiling warmly as she guided me to a small, dimly lit room. Dr. Moreno, a tall man with silver hair and a calm demeanor, greeted me with a firm handshake. "So," he said, settling into a chair across from me, "what brings you in today?" I hesitated, unsure how to begin. "I'm not actually here for myself," I admitted. "My wife, Clara, has been seeing you. I found your card in her things." Dr. Moreno's brow furrowed. "I'm afraid I can't discuss other clients," he said, his tone professional but firm. "I understand," I said quickly, "but something's going on. She's been lying to me, acting distant. And then there's this." I pulled out the photo and handed it to him. "This isn't as old as it looks. It's connected to her somehow, and I think it's tied to why she's seeing you." He studied the photo for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, almost cautious. "This photo, where did you get it?" "A thrift store," I said. "Why?" Dr. Moreno sighed and leaned back in his chair. "This is complicated," he said. "And frankly, I'm not sure how much I should say. But if your wife hasn't told you, then you deserve to know." My pulse quickened. "Told me what?" After a long pause, he said, "Clara isn't here for therapy in the traditional sense. She's part of a research study I've been conducting." "Research?" I echoed, confused. "What kind of research?" Dr. Moreno hesitated, then reached for a folder on his desk. He pulled out a sheet of paper and slid it toward me. It was a consent form, with Clara's name and signature at the bottom. The header read, "Behavioral Study on Memory Manipulation and Cognitive Conditioning." I stared at it, my mind struggling to process the words. "Memory manipulation?" I repeated. "What the hell does that mean?" Dr. Moreno folded his hands. "We've been working with a small group of participants to explore how memories can be altered or fabricated through hypnosis and suggestion. It's groundbreaking work, but it's also controversial. Not everyone reacts well to the process." "And Clara?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What did you do to her?" "She volunteered," he said quickly. "But the process is still experimental. It seems she's experiencing some unintended side effects. Gaps in her memory, difficulty distinguishing between what's real and what isn't." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "So you're saying she doesn't remember what's going on? Or that she's lying because you made her think something that isn't true?" Dr. Moreno shook his head. "It's more complicated than that. Clara's memories of the study itself have been partially suppressed. But there's another layer to this." He hesitated. "There's someone else involved." "Someone else?" "Another participant," he said. "They were paired together for part of the study. Their interactions were carefully controlled, but sometimes connections form." I didn't need him to spell it out. Clara's lover wasn't someone she met at work or a casual fling. It was someone she'd been partnered with in this bizarre experiment. But why? And how deep did it go? "Who is it?" I demanded. "I need to know." Dr. Moreno hesitated, then scribbled a name and address on a piece of paper. "This is all I can give you," he said. "But please be careful. Emotions run high in these situations, and the outcomes are rarely what you expect." The address led to a modest house on the edge of town. My heart pounded as I rang the doorbell, and a moment later, a man answered. He was in his late 30s, with sandy blonde hair and a wary expression. "Can I help you?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as he took in my face. "I'm looking for Clara's partner," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. His expression shifted, guilt, fear, and something else I couldn't name. "You're her husband," he said, more statement than question. Yes, I said tightly. And you are? Evan, he said, stepping back and motioning for me to come inside. The house was tidy but sparse, as if he didn't spend much time there. He gestured for me to sit, but I stayed standing. What's going on? I asked. What's your connection to my wife? Evan sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's complicated. Try me, I said, my patience wearing thin. He hesitated, then said, Clara and I were part of the same study. At first, it was just exercises, building trust, sharing personal stories. But then they started planting memories. They'd tell us things that never happened, make us believe we had a history together. It was surreal. We knew it wasn't real, but after a while, it felt real. I finished for him. Evan nodded. Exactly. They made us think we were in love, that we'd been through things together, things that bonded us. And even after the study ended, I couldn't shake it. I don't think Clara could either. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't just an affair. It was a fabricated connection, engineered by people who treated my wife like a lab rat. But knowing it was artificial didn't make it hurt any less. Why didn't she tell me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because she doesn't know how to, Evan said. She's as confused as you are. Maybe more. I stood there, staring at him, my mind spinning. The betrayal was undeniable, but so was the manipulation. Clara had been a victim just as much as I was. And now I had to decide what to do with the truth. I sat in my car outside Evan's house for what felt like hours. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I couldn't move. My mind was a storm of emotions. Betrayal, anger, confusion, and, unexpectedly, guilt. How much of this was Clara's fault? How much of it was mine? Could I have stopped this if I'd paid closer attention? If I hadn't let my suspicions fester silently for so long? Evan's words echoed in my head. They made us think we were in love. The idea was maddening. Artificial or not, the feelings were real now, weren't they? How could Clara not have seen what this would do to us, to me? When I finally drove home, the house felt foreign. Clara was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up as I walked in, her expression unreadable. Hey, she said cautiously. You've been gone a while. Everything okay? It was such a normal thing to say, but in that moment, it felt like a slap. No, I said, my voice cold. Everything is not okay. She blinked, taken aback. What's going on? I know about the study, I said, watching her carefully. Her face froze. The color drained from her cheeks. And for a moment, I thought she might deny it. But then she sighed, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world had finally landed on her. I didn't know how to tell you, she said quietly. That's the understatement of the year. I shot back, the anger bubbling up before I could stop it. You didn't know how to tell me that you've been seeing some hypnotist who's been messing with your memories? That you've been, what? Playing house with another man in some bizarre experiment. It wasn't like that, she said quickly, her voice rising. I didn't. Evan and I never. Don't lie to me, I interrupted, my voice sharp. I talked to him. I know everything. Clara's eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked genuinely panicked. You went to see Evan? I had to, I said, because you wouldn't tell me the truth. She stood, pacing the room like a caged animal. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. It wasn't real. None of it was real. They planted those memories in us. They manipulated us. But you kept it going, I said, my voice breaking. You let it bleed into our life. You lied to me over and over again. Why? Clara stopped pacing, her face crumpling. Because I didn't know what was real anymore, she admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. The memories they gave us, they felt so real. And when the study ended, it was like I was missing something, like I'd lost this whole other life. I didn't know how to let it go. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about identity, about trust, about the kind of damage that couldn't be undone. And Evan? I asked. What about him? Was he just some artifact of the experiment? She hesitated, and that pause said more than words ever could. It's not like that, she said finally. I haven't seen him since the study ended. But sometimes I think about him, about what we were supposed to be, and I hate myself for it. Her confession shattered something inside me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers she couldn't give. Instead, I sank into the couch, feeling like the floor had been pulled out from under me. The days that followed were a blur. Clara tried to reach out, to explain, but every word felt hollow. I couldn't trust her. Not her words, not her emotions, not even her memories. I started sleeping in the guest room. Clara respected my distance, but I could feel her watching me. Her presence a constant reminder of the mess we were in. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. Not entirely. Not when part of me still loved her, still wanted to believe we could fix this. But then, another twist came, one that made everything worse. It started with a letter. An official-looking envelope addressed to Clara arrived in the mail one afternoon. She wasn't home, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I opened it. Inside was a letter from the research institute running the study. It was full of clinical language, but one phrase stood out. As you are aware, the memories implanted during the study may cause unintended consequences, including emotional instability and difficulty distinguishing between fabricated and genuine experiences. But that wasn't the worst part. Attached to the letter was a summary of the study's findings, and at the bottom, a note in bold. Subject 16. Significant anomalies detected. Recommend further monitoring. Clara was subject 16. When she got home that evening, I confronted her with the letter. What is this? I demanded, holding it up. Her face fell. It's nothing, she said weakly. Just follow-up paperwork. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice shaking. They're saying there's something wrong with you, that this experiment messed with your head in ways they didn't expect. What does that mean, Clara? I don't know, she shouted, her voice breaking. I don't know what's real anymore. Okay? I don't know if the things I feel are mine or theirs. I don't know who I am anymore. Her words stopped me cold. For the first time, I saw the depth of her pain. The fear, the confusion, the self-loathing. It was raw and real, and it cut through my anger like a knife. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, tears streaming down her face. But I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if I can. Neither did I. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about us. About whether we could survive the wreckage of something we never saw coming. And I wasn't sure we could. The next few days were some of the longest of my life. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, staring down two paths I couldn't bring myself to take. One led toward trying to salvage a marriage that felt like it had been built on quicksand. The other led to starting over. A terrifying prospect after 6 years of love, arguments, shared dreams, and now, betrayal. Clara gave me space. She stayed in our bedroom, while I stayed in the guest room, avoiding each other in the liminal space of what was left of our life together. At times, I caught glimpses of her. Her face pale and drawn, her eyes rimmed with red. She was hurting too, but I couldn't tell if her pain came from guilt or grief. Maybe both. Maybe more than I could understand. One evening, I sat at the dining table, the envelope from the research institute in front of me. The summary report, Clara's designation as Subject 16, the cold, clinical language that described her fractured sense of self. It all blurred together. For the first time, I tried to put myself in her shoes. What would it feel like to have your memories manipulated, your emotions twisted by people in lab coats? To love someone or think you did, only to realize that love wasn't yours at all. Maybe I was a victim in all of this, but so was Clara. And that realization left me feeling hollow. The following night, I asked Clara to sit down with me. Her hands fidgeted nervously as she perched on the edge of the couch. I had rehearsed this conversation in my head a dozen times, but now that she was in front of me, the words felt heavy. I don't know where to start, I admitted. Just say what you're feeling, she said softly. I can take it, I sighed, leaning forward with my elbows on my knees. I don't know if we can come back from this. What happened, it broke something. My trust, your trust in yourself, maybe even the foundation of what we had. And I don't know how to rebuild something like that. Clara's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might fall apart. But she surprised me. She straightened her back, wiped her eyes, and nodded. I understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And I don't blame you. Her acceptance hit me harder than anger would have. Part of me wanted her to fight, to demand that we try, to give me a reason to hold on. But she didn't. She let me go, and somehow that hurt even more. In the days that followed, we began the process of separating our lives. It was awkward and painful, a series of small heartbreaks. Deciding who would keep the couch, the photo albums, the dog. Clara insisted on leaving the house to me, saying it would be too hard for her to stay. I didn't argue. Every corner of the place was haunted by memories of us, but I couldn't bear the thought of giving it up. Before she left, Clara handed me a small envelope. I wrote this for you, she said, her voice trembling. I thought it might help, or at least explain. I waited until she was gone to open it. Inside was a letter, written in her neat handwriting. Dear James, I don't know where to begin. I've tried to write this so many times, and nothing feels right. How do you apologize for breaking the heart of someone you love? How do you explain something you don't fully understand yourself? What I did to you, to us, was unforgivable. I lied to you, kept secrets, and let my own confusion bleed into our marriage. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. Even when the lines between reality and memory blurred, you were my anchor. The one thing that felt real. When I signed up for that study, I thought I was doing something harmless, maybe even helpful. I didn't realize what it would cost me or us. And by the time I understood, it was too late. I was too afraid to tell you the truth, too ashamed to admit how lost I felt. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not sure I deserve it. But I hope you can find peace, even if it's without me. And I hope, someday, you can remember me for the person I was before all of this, before the lies, before the mistakes. The person who loved you with everything she had. Take care of yourself, James. You deserve happiness, even if it's not with me. Love always, Clara. I folded the letter and set it on the table, my chest tight. There was no vindication in her words, no relief. Only a bittersweet ache that felt like it might never fade. Months later, the house felt emptier than ever. The photos of Clara and me were gone, replaced by neutral artwork that didn't remind me of anything. I focused on work, on reconnecting with friends I'd drifted away from during my marriage. Some days were better than others. Some nights, I still reached for her in the dark, forgetting she wasn't there. The study haunted me. I couldn't stop wondering how many other lives it had fractured, how many other couples were dealing with the fallout of experiments conducted in sterile offices. Part of me wanted to dig deeper, to expose the truth. But I didn't. Not yet. One evening, I found the photo again, tucked into a drawer. I stared at Clara's face. The face of a woman I loved. The face of a woman I didn't fully know. The others in the photo looked back at me, their laughter frozen in time, a reminder of something I'd never understand. For the first time, I noticed something I'd missed before. A faint inscription on the back of the frame. Memory is a fragile thing, but it's all we have. I didn't know what it meant. I wasn't sure I wanted to. But as I set the photo back in the drawer and closed it, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that I could move on. Hope that I could heal. And hope that someday I might find the truth, not about Clara, but about myself. It's been nearly a year since Clara left, and I've had a lot of time to think about everything that happened, about us, the study, and the pieces of myself I've had to put back together. If you'd told me a year ago that my marriage would unravel because of memory manipulation and an artificial connection, I would have laughed in your face. Now it's a story I can't escape, one that's shaped who I've become. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't the betrayal or even the lies. It was the uncertainty, not knowing what was real or what had been planted. Not knowing if the love Clara and I shared was strong enough to survive something as devastating as this. In the end, it wasn't, but that doesn't mean it was meaningless. Here are some lessons I've learned from this experience, in case anyone else out there finds themselves in the nightmare of doubt and betrayal. Trust your instincts, but don't let them consume you. When I first noticed Clara acting strangely, I doubted myself as much as I doubted her. I thought I was being paranoid, seeing things that weren't there. If I'd trusted my gut earlier, maybe I could have confronted the issue before it spiraled. That said, obsession can blind you just as much as denial. Balance is everything. The truth isn't always what you expect. When I first suspected Clara, I thought she might be having a standard affair. The reality was so much more complicated and harder to process. Sometimes the answers you find don't fit into neat boxes, and you have to grapple with truths that don't have easy solutions. People make mistakes, but context matters. Clara wasn't blameless, but she wasn't entirely at fault either. She was manipulated, lied to, and put in an impossible situation. That doesn't excuse her choices, but it gave me a deeper understanding of how fragile we all are when outside forces pull the strings. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It took me a long time, but I've finally forgiven Clara. Not just for what she did to me, but for what she did to herself. Forgiveness doesn't mean we're back together or even that I'd want to be. It means I've let go of the anger, because carrying it only hurt me more. Forgiveness is for you, not for them. Love isn't enough. This was the hardest lesson to learn. I loved Clara with everything I had, and I believe she loved me too. But love alone couldn't fix the damage, couldn't rebuild the trust we lost or erase the scars left by the lies. Relationships need more than love. They need honesty, accountability, and a willingness to fight for each other. Without those, even the strongest love can crumble. The pain, the confusion, the sleepless nights, it's all normal. But don't lose yourself in it. Take the time to figure out what you need, what you can forgive, and what you can't. And remember, moving on isn't failure. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. As for me, I'm still figuring out what's next. I've started seeing a therapist, which has helped more than I expected. I've reconnected with friends I drifted away from, and I'm even dipping my toes back into dating, though it's a slow process. Trust is hard to rebuild, even with myself. But I'm learning, I'm healing, and I'm beginning to believe that the person I was before all of this, the person who loved thrift stores, who saw value in the forgotten and discarded, still exists. Maybe I've even found him again. I'll leave you with this thought. If our memories define us, what happens when they're not our own? Can we still claim the life they built? Or do we start over from scratch with nothing but the pieces we have left? Asterisk. I don't have the answer, but I'm trying to find it. And for now, that's enough. If you have an answer, let me know in the comments below this video. Bye.